Hello. We almost got Lonnie. Can you all hear me? All right, so I'm not sure if we have Lonnie, but we're going to talk about Apropedia for a little while. Can take any questions in the Movement Camp IRC channel. Y'all let me know if the levels are okay, if I'm too loud or too quiet or anything. I'm not sure where Lonnie is. I think he's still trying to get connected. Sorry for the delays in getting started. I guess I'll start out with a little bit of background on my part of the Apropedia project, where I've come from on this whole front. I guess like most of the people here have been working on this in one facet or another for a long time. Building resources like this for sustainability, alternative technology when it was still called that. There was a project through World Changing. For the people familiar with that site, the Bright Green Wiki, that I was part of that ultimately ill-fated project. And after trying to build similar resources, found Apropedia and decided to throw in with them, and because I liked what they had going on. Between Lonnie and Chris promoting what they're doing and doing a really good job of bringing different projects online, it seems like the one of the premier appropriate technology resources. But of course, what we want to do is make it the resource, or I guess merge with the resource, and figure out exactly what we need to provide the community to make it the most useful resource we can. So Appropedia is involved in a number of different initiatives right now. I need the window for the other broadcaster. Hold on, I'm sorry. Michael, you're back. Okay, and I just caught that, Michael. I had muted to kill the cancel and cancel the echo and didn't think about the fact that I wouldn't be able to hear you. Okay, and Lonnie's going to get back online. Appropedia, I think, is an encyclopedic resource for a lot of different material. I think one of the best ways it was put, or some of the ways that I understand it, is we want to provide a resource of things that work to people in different situations and document how those work to connect people with that data. So, we also look at textbook type material, learning type material, international development. Again, it's pretty wide ranging as far as what is actually being worked on. Lonnie, of course, is with the Humboldt State University and has a lot of the students there, and there's a number of other organizations that are using it for classwork and for adopting some of their coursework into resources. See if there's a good overview of that I can paste into the chat. One of the other resources that I know we're looking for is similar projects in other languages to branch out with. It was something that was started pretty early on. I think it might be fair to say that some of the language efforts have stalled, but we certainly want to bring those back up to speed, see what other green wikis are out there, who's looking to collaborate and get a little bit more traction going. As Chris has often mentioned, we're trying to hit that tipping point of growth to where some more of the community can take over what's going on with the site and updating it. It doesn't seem like we're quite getting enough traction to do that, but it's certainly getting there. We're working on some social media initiatives, trying to figure out what the best way to use those to enable building content is. One of the big questions is what social media is appropriate on-site versus what belongs somewhere else on any of the other platforms. Like many people have said, there's this disparate group of platforms that maybe don't necessarily talk to each other. And I don't know that anybody, I guess that would be my first question for the group, is what platform makes the most sense to kind of try to coalesce around, what standards or what protocols. Some talk about pattern languages. Oh, good a question. Much better at questions. Yeah, I think we'd certainly be interested in exploring that possibility of linking Appropedia to a collaborative innovation platform. I think part of the idea of having a relatively high-level resource is delegating out some of that more detailed work within certain scopes or within certain realms. I know Chris is using a fundraising, the name of which is totally escaping me at the moment. Kickstarter, is that what it was? So I can find it later, or somebody can paste it. But in any case, you know, there's some interesting initiatives like that. Kickstarter, is it? Yeah. So is there a specific platform anybody's thinking of, or is it more just the generalized idea of having one at all? I know on the social side, as far as getting back a little bit to what Appropedia is doing, we've got BuddyPress and its forums and its social features integrated into the development blog for Appropedia. Getting towards the end stages on feedback for that and getting ready to go live. It's going to be interesting to see, again, how that integrates and how that integrates with other groups, and how the community is going to find that useful. I think Sherry was just taking notes at my topics there. Yes? And now has to go. ThinkCycle is new to me, Tim. I'm not familiar with that one at all. I can pull it up and take a look at it in a minute and see what's going on. I think the parts where Appropedia is strongest is in the textual information, the work that the students have done, the how-to, the DIY stuff. Now there's a lot of projects online in the DIY space, in the how-to space. So there's a lot of content to cull from there. There is, to me, a little bit of an issue with more ephemeral data being on the wiki, where some of that may be better to live in blogs. It's kind of an ongoing conversation I've been having with Lonnie, and certainly interested in feedback on how other people see that. And to be more specific there, is that a news story or a report or something that is very time sensitive, maybe not the best material for a blog, whereas a little bit more timeless, a little bit more how-to, more encyclopedic, makes a lot more sense on a wiki that's focused on that kind of information. The blog side as well, because it's so temporal, because the information changes all the time, it's not the best for having long-term discussions so much, or long-term information. I'm going to look at ThinkCycle just briefly. Yeah, Michael. Well, I don't know. We're in negotiations. I'll leave it to Lonnie to discuss specifics. I don't know if we can name names, but there's some other social media platforms, if you will, or organizations where we're looking at essentially syndicating content to them. And so we've had a lot of discussions about how to best window our content, or you know, if you look at a situation how Answers.com syndicates Wikipedia's content, they take a snapshot of approved versions and then push that out, and lots of places pull that data. So we've been looking at different ways to position ourselves to where we can be that resource, you know, the appropriate technology version of Wikipedia. Yes, definitely, Michael. Appropedia is about appropriate technology. It is at its core the appropriate technology wiki. Permaculture, sustainability, definitely a big part of that. As an aside, as far as my contrarian nature, I would argue a lot of times that sustainable technology isn't always appropriate, that sometimes unsustainable things need to be done in order to get to the end goal. Maybe a, excuse me, maybe a little bit on the outlandish side, but I was reading recently about the cook stoves that are very useful in reducing soot, carbon, asthma, that kind of thing, in places where people are still cooking on open fires and the like. Now, personally, I wouldn't mind seeing 1 billion of those, airdropped by the U.S. military to get that kind of thing moving immediately in a more useful direction. Probably not a sustainable way to do it, but I think it's hard to argue with the impact that something like that would have to immediately do that kind of action. MediaWiki doesn't really communicate with Drupal spaces or with Drupal in general that I'm aware of, and there's a lot of question as to how that functions from a user standpoint. For instance, one of the options we've looked at is ways to replace MediaWiki's talk pages or discussion pages, which are pretty scary for newcomers. If you don't know how a wiki works and how the conversations go on those kind of pages, it's very disorienting. So one of the options in there's a way to integrate WordPress so that it becomes tied into the discussion pages or replaces those discussion pages. But if it's not done in a very smooth way, I think it could ultimately be detrimental because people would just get that much more confused. I was on a blog, now I'm on the wiki. It's hard to say where it goes. MediaWiki integrates with MediaWiki well and other MediaWikis, and there's a ton of development, but it really, again, depends on what you mean by integrate. You can do some things such as a tag on the blog goes to a related portal page or category page automatically. Something like that's not a problem. But do you want single sign-on? That's a whole different solution. There's any number of examples like that as far as what you're actually looking for and how you want it to work. I think interoperating might be a much better word there for what I think most people mean when they say integrating. Interoperating is definitely going to be more valuable in the short run, I believe, simply because it's so much less work to leverage. Definitely the lower hanging fruit is the interoperability. The other issue with actual integration is that you're to some degree making things permanent in what I think we all realize is a very fluid, changing ecosystem. We could pour a lot of time and effort into integrating MediaWiki with Drupal, and then one or the other of those doesn't, ends up not being a dominant platform, or there's something else we need to integrate it with. Maybe it would have been better just to kind of collaborate and cross-link and delegate out different scopes, different parts that people are working on. Let me check, see what Lonnie's got going here. I don't think we're going to get Lonnie on the video, so I think we're going to bring him in on chat, and he can help prompt me, and I'll answer some more questions here. I thought Chris was going to be with us in the chat channel, and I don't see him on. So there's a hang on. So let me talk just a little bit more about what I'm doing before Chris and Lonnie jump in and give me some more stuff to discuss and present here. Whereas I guess I have to say that my passion's probably more in the content creation and organization and doing the topology and the mapping and that kind of thing. What there's been a real need for with Appropedia has been the technical support on the back end, the server support. We're having some scalability issues. MediaWiki is not a light piece of software. So hosting resources are probably as big as an issue as people resources as far as time involved and what needs to happen to make things scale and grow. From the topology standpoint, that often makes me seem like a pretty hierarchical kind of guy, but mostly I just want things clearly categorized so that we can tell who's doing what. How many different projects are there in the green wiki space, much less the green knowledge base space? Appropedia's absorbed probably a dozen or more of them at this point, but I know there's still many other communities out there that it would be nice to get on board and heading in one direction, whether that's Appropedia or some greater thing that the project merges with down the road. Chris is seconding that Appropedia is absolutely about appropriate technology. Of course, some of the question comes down to how you define that. What is appropriate for a particular situation. One of the other big initiatives on that front that we're working on, and there's a couple of different parties that we're collaborating with on this front, and that's to figure out how to best utilize semantic data in the semantic media wiki so that you could write queries for things such as, I'm in this location or this climate and I need a solution for this particular issue. But that's quite a bit of categorization, quite a bit of work on the topology and where everything falls. And of course, there's always the question of at what point, at what point does Appropedia try to become the end-all permaculture resource versus delegating that out to another permaculture group or website, something to that effect. On the topic of permaculture, we've been looking at the concept of inputs and outputs. A couple of the different permaculture wikis have been eyed for information and inspiration on that front. There's a lot of different options. I want to say one of the best ones that I've seen was the foreign aid worker site, and I feel completely silly that I can't remember which one it is now. Chris can probably remind me. But they have a pretty good semantic wiki that achieves that end of it. Peace Corps wiki is who it is. And I think that's kind of a model for what we're looking at overlaying onto MediaWiki, or I'm sorry, onto Appropedia in the semantic sense to try to get, there's so many resources and there's so many different ways to slice and dice it. So you have problems with things, say papercrete is a pretty interesting construction material, but it really only works in certain climates. So how do you define those climates? Whose map of ecoregions do you follow? Longitude and latitude isn't adequate. You can do city and state and that kind of breakdown easy enough, but there's certainly places where same technologies would work in lots of different ecosystems. Part of what we're looking for in the community is to have more folks on the editing front, more folks on the content creation, and especially right now, since we've been doing so much of a push into improving the site, feedback on what makes things useful. Michael's asking if my background is in information science or if it's something that I had to get up to speed on. I'm the lifelong computer kid type. I was fixing people's PCs in grade school and started my own business in high school and consulting and providing technical support and that kind of thing for a couple of decades now. Also, when I was still in grade school, I became very interested in what was called alternative technology at that time, which would now be known as renewable energy more commonly. In getting into that kind of drifted into sustainability, and to go slightly tangential and touch back on some of the other conversations we've had, I came in a very roundabout way to the local currency project that I'm working on as a root solution to many of the problems that I identified in looking at things like economic injustice and social justice. What's the root cause of some of those? And interest-bearing currency is a lot of it, and lack of local control is a lot of it. So there's a pretty good example of how much information do I put on Appropedia about that versus how much do I build out my own wiki. And so it's useful for me to have some kind of an idea of what the scope of the site is. And Chris can't hear. I wish I had a way to like conference you in on Skype. Actually, I probably could, now that I think about it. About library information science perspective, yeah, those certainly provide frameworks for how things are organized. One of the transitions that I think topology and categorization in general is going through right now is from the hierarchical models of nested folders and categories, traditional file systems on computers, into this more tag-based, subject-based, what some people call the folksonomy. Well, from the standpoint of somebody who works with that stuff a lot, the problem with folksonomies is that they're not very normalized. They're not necessarily organized in a useful way. It can be really good to get an idea of how folks on the ground organize their thoughts collectively around these different issues, but that might not generate the most useful kind of top-down overview of what's going on. Does that answer the question at all, Michael, as far as what you're thinking there on the library sciences? I know it's the physical metaphor for it is that under most of the traditional methods of organizing information, a book in a library can only exist in one place within this very defined tree of the Dewey Decimal System or whatever the Library of Congress's system. With tags and with virtual documents, suddenly it can exist in as many places as we want it to. How many categories does this apply to? And really the sticking point on organizing a lot of this stuff seems to be how do you define the categories? Is sustainable technology a superset or a subset of appropriate technology? And I don't think, or rather I think without these answers, we're not going to be able to define processes adequate and efficient enough to scale, I think, the way we all want this movement to scale. So in general, I'm definitely very interested in collaborating with some of the other folks that are talking about mapping, as I understand it, the different technologies that we might be able to leverage to kind of define some of that stuff and sort some of that out. Yeah, and Michael raises the big issue of how do you even if we come up with a bunch of good categories that work for us on Appropedia, when we're bringing new content in or when we're syndicating to other people, how do you bring that stuff across? How do you make that connection between those disparate systems? Ben's asking, addressing legacy questions like security, permanence, accessibility, and repurposing to knowledge donors. I'll run with that for a bit. I'm not positive understanding a couple of parts of it. As far as legacy goes, and I think Lonnie and Chris could both probably back me up here, that licensing is the most infuriating deal. You know, not even among open content licenses, you've got how many to sort through. You know, it's good that the Commons, Collaborative Commons has normalized some of that, but you know, there's still probably 15 open content licenses to deal with, at least 3, 4, 5, 6 to be seriously concerned about. That's the biggest, I think, legacy issue that we face. Everything else becomes fairly secondary technical concerns as far as how do you, I mean, not that they're trivial, but the next step down is you know, how do you bring a PDF into a wiki? You know, there's that kind of legacy information structure. Security, again, that's you know, that's pretty industry standard. How do you keep a website from getting hacked stuff? I don't know if there's anything specific to this group or conversation. Permanence, the same way. One of the survivability steps that Lonnie took early on was choosing MediaWiki and providing the data export so that anybody who wanted it could take it and have a copy of it and keep a backup. You know, archive.org archives a whole bunch of stuff. People scrape content. You know, internally we have multiple servers that the information resides on, so there's, you know, a couple of layers of, oh, we lost a server, or oh, I didn't mean to delete that file. That we've got that kind of backup. Accessibility and repurposing, again, you know, I guess I see that from, I do web optimization. I guess that might be helpful to explain the framework to some degree, or my bias in things, is I do a lot of consulting on, you've got a website, well now what does it do? How do you do it? And that's a superset of search engine optimization, which is only really a very tiny piece of the puzzle. You know, it doesn't matter how much traffic you drive to a site if people aren't doing what you're trying to get them to do, or what you're helping to enable them to do, or hoping to enable them to do. Has to include user interface, has to include user experience, has to include the user stories to figure out what we need to do. It's interesting to think of the contrast between agile or rapid development versus slow approaches, and that's something where that almost screams of appropriate technology question. I mean, slow programming makes me think of a waterfall development model, that whole, you know, try to make it all at once and then ship it, which we all know is gone and dead or dying. So, you know, the development, the content moves, all of that kind of thing really needs to be on the more agile front. Now, perhaps for longer term planning, you know, get something like the longnow.org where we can sit back and reflect and talk about what this is all going to mean in 10,000 years. But I think, you know, for this fairly critical next decade, you know, we need to be looking at tools that most effectively move us in the direction we want as quickly as possible. Permaculture definitely ties into agile versus slow, as Chris has mentioned in the chat room. Yeah, Chris is saying in the chat that the real strength of a wiki is that it's slow relative to a news site or a blog, and that would be a little bit of backstory here is good to explain what I'm trying to see Appropedia do, and that would be the world-changing bright green wiki. Love the world-changing guys. Really inspiring to see what they had done. The problem with a blog is that there's no real resource where you could just get started, where you don't have to waste a ton of time digging through historical data. You know, I'm really interested in creating that kind of centralized, definitive resource. It's you know, as again, Crystal mentioned that I push back pretty hard on forums asking exactly what they're for and what the point is, and that I find forums infuriatingly useless to try to get useful data back out of. I mean, you want to talk about did this work or not? Well, how many people actually dig through 15 pages of a particular thread to sort out and pull the gems out of that? So, you know, when that knowledge is being created, how do you capture that? How do you most effectively put it in place? So for me, part of that defines, or part of that is answered. The solution to that is defining the scopes of both of these sites. You know, what kind of stuff goes on the blog, what kind of stuff goes on the wiki, what stuff goes on completely different projects. Like the Kickstarter, you know, I think it's fair to say that Appropedia probably isn't going to be the best fundraising mechanism for that kind of microfinance. Certainly makes sense to use their service for that. What kind of, Michael's asking, how do we allow better windows into what is essentially encyclopedic content? How do you define better there? Would we be looking at, say, using the approved revisions flag in MediaWiki, where we can say this particular page on permaculture is the version that we want syndicated across to other platforms? Again, all of the Wikipedia, answers.com tie-in, and all the various places you see that scrape MediaWiki content. Using a standard solid platform, if not the lightest or most elegant one, but using a platform like MediaWiki, it's not likely development's going to stop on that anytime soon, even if Wikipedia goes away. So simply using a relatively high-profile platform there helps survivability, helps interoperability. You know, there are ways to export, you know, within the MediaWiki universe, there's really solid ways to tie those together. But even as as soon as you start talking about, oh, well, let's tie together with a TikiWiki site or some other wiki software, it becomes, you know, it's a different programming language, it's a different syntax. You know, you immediately have issues integrating that content. So then, you know, we kind of talk about, I guess, the, how did you phrase it? Interoperability versus integrating. And again, as I understand and define those things, it makes more sense to figure out ways to interoperate. I think even the route going for a pattern language, just to make sure we're all talking about the same thing here. Something that was mentioned in the earlier sessions was, you know, platforms. Well, you know, I've gotten in any number of discussions within a very small scope of just leading web programmers about what you mean by a platform. You know, you're talking about the operating system, or you're talking relatively metaphorically. You know, same with frameworks and that kind of thing. So we have to be pretty specific about what we want there and what we mean there. Right. The difference in protocols versus platforms. That was on the previous one. That topic's still not coming through, Michael. In any case, to step back there a second, very interested in that pattern language and whatever initiatives, you know, that ties in very closely to the topology and figuring out exactly, you know, what we're talking about, what we're defining. And you know, it's very important for building the kind of resource that we're building with Appropedia is to define what goes where, you know, what it looks like, how it reads, you know, aiming for consistent style, and a good idea of who else is out there doing similar work and how we can avoid duplicating effort any more than we have to. Pattern languages, and again, this is as I understand them, essentially means defining all your terms and then having short sets of terms that mean fairly specific things within the scope that you're working in. I guess I don't know of a better example offhand than speaking to try to define some of those larger words, you know. The permaculture, I guess, might be the other related deal that they're essentially looking for a pattern language for permanent culture. So, you know, to get, if we don't have, a pattern language may actually be the lowest hanging fruit of coalescing all these different efforts, and that at least at that point we're all speaking the same language or something close. You know, now obviously I don't necessarily mean English there, but you know, the same definitions, the same shared terms, as far as, you know, this is what we're talking about as a framework, this is what we're talking about as a platform, you know, this is what we're talking about with even just words like collaboration. And I think without that, you know, we're going to thrash around a bit, but without that language defined, you're not going to get the systems talking to each other at even at a collaborative level, much less on a technical level, because, you know, the words really kind of need to be normalized across that across those efforts. And the protocols versus platforms that Jay was talking about, I don't know. I'll reserve judgment on that. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about it. And that it challenges where I stand. It makes it all the more interesting to see what their thinking on the subject is. You know, for me, I'd much rather see a shared platform to start getting stuff established on, because I think there's been a ton of effort in building communication protocols. You know, XML is not a magic bullet, because you can really format, you know, it's a way to make valid markup. It's not a way to define a language or something more akin to a pattern language. So, you know, again, you can throw all the XML at something you want. If nobody else supports that particular flavor, it doesn't ultimately do you any good. Okay, good. It looks like we have some folks getting ready to come on in another few minutes here. Yeah, who has any last questions or comments or anything I should take away as far as conversations with Lonnie and Chris once we get done here today? You're too kind. That was marginal. I've worked pretty hard Friday actually to try to put together my notes from the currency project I've worked on to try to do a presentation, and unfortunately this weekend probably couldn't work out much worse for me on a spare time front. I have a huge number of projects, work projects, paying projects, you know, getting the bill done to try to get out here, but you know, wouldn't miss it. More rich content for Appropedia, talking videos. We've definitely discussed that. I don't know that at least in the Appropedia team that I'm aware of and working with, I know there's actually a lot of people involved in the periphery. I don't know that we have the production capabilities to really do, say, good videos. You know, what I saw from the Jack Bank earlier was really impressive, really well done. Of course, the Coalition of the Willing video was excellent. Instructional videos, instructionals, yeah, that would be great. And that does kind of touch back on what does Appropedia specialize in? how far towards all things to all people do we want to drift? Do we need to make an appropriate technology version of something like Instructables, or do we actually get a ton more traction working on the green section of Instructables? And I know that one issue that Lonnie's expressed in the past with it's a trade-off, because there's already a big group out there for those non-sustainable groups. You potentially could get right in there and get good leverage, but then you go back to the ownership issues and the survivability issues. Is it locked up in a proprietary platform? Or we can we actually repurpose it any way we want? I think with so much moving onto the web, though, I mean, that's really the way things are going, is towards open content on all fronts. I mean, even Facebook is starting to open up some of their stuff, and they've got their API going and so forth. I'll have to check out the Kaltura community video. Not familiar with that. And yeah, like Chris said, it's a matter of people creating the content. But I'd also say that there are the questions of where it lives and how thin do we want to spread our resources. MediaWiki from a technical standpoint would be an extremely poor platform for doing video. Even just links to Vimeo videos or YouTube or anything like that would be more useful. It might be worth talking to some folks at a group like Instructables, see if they would be interested in some kind of collaboration there. Certainly worth a shot. I don't know what other, I know there's other open source media management tools that would be an option, but it is hard to beat the base of something like YouTube. Obviously having a YouTube channel is a good deal. Well, so there's no other questions. I think Marius is in now and on. Where did we go? I'll throw out one last thing on Awesome and built for MediaWiki. There's a tool out there called Wiki Mind Map. And I'll paste in the link into the channel. You can pick a particular subject area or topic and see all the interconnections from that topic. You can also install it on your own MediaWiki, and probably most entertaining to me right now, you can export it to a mind map file and load that mind map up in FreeMind, which is cross-platform and open source, and all the hyperlinks are there and everything, and you can build from there and explore and reorganize. And I've been working with some of the high-level category issues with Apropedia. Lonnie's been off and on. He popped off and on the channel a few times, but I haven't actually seen him, so don't know. Look, Mr. Fuller's joined us. Excellent. Good to see you, Bucky. Marius? Seems reasonable enough. If you guys want to post that up, I can go ahead and sign off. Thank you all. I'm looking forward to the rest of it.